Welcome to the Guild Tremor video strategy guides. I'm Danton, and today I'll be covering the Freya 10-man encounter. Throughout the fight, Freya will have an undispellable buff called Touch of ANR. This heals her for 6,000 health per second. In addition to that, Freya will have a buff called Attuned to Nature, which increases healing done to her by 4% per stack. At the beginning of the fight, there are 150 stacks of this buff on her, allowing her to gain an additional 600% healing. The only way to dispel the Attuned to buff nature is to destroy her mobs that she will summon. There are two phases to this fight, her add phase and the boss phase. During the add phase, one of 3 types of adds will spawn for a total of 6 waves. Each wave spawns 60 seconds after the previous wave, regardless if they're dead or not. There will never be 2 waves of the same type of mobs in succession, and there will never be more than 2 actual spawns of the same type. The first type of spawn are a group of 3 elementals. This group is generally considered the hardest of the spawns to deal with, as all 3 mobs must die within 12 seconds of each other, or they will regain all lost health and continue to be a nuisance to the raid. One of the elementals is called Ancient Water Spirit, and will attack with frost-based damage and a frontal cone, as well as cast an ability called Tidal Wave, which causes it to surge forward for 40 yards through enemies in a line, dealing damage and tossing them through the air. Our guild normally tanks this mob with a rogue or another class with interrupt abilities to deal with the tidal surge. Another is called Storm Lasher. This mob attacks with Storm Bolt, which is a 2-second cast ability that causes around 6,500 nature damage. It also casts Lightning Lash, which is similar to Lightning Bolt, jumping from target to target up to a maximum of 3 targets with increasing damage per target. The off-tank can easily pick this mob up and tank it away from the other raid members. The last mob is called Snap Lasher. This mob does not have any special attacks, but attacks made against the mob will cause it to gain Hardened Bark. This ability increases its damage, but decreases its movement speed. 20 stacks of the ability will cause it to be immobilized. DPS should attack this mob until 20 stacks of Hardened Bark, and then let the ranged finish it off. The second type of mobs that will spawn are called Detonating Lashers. There will be a total of 12 Lashers that have 2 special abilities. The first is their ability to deal 150% of melee damage as fire damage, called Flame Lash. Their other ability is called Detonate. This occurs upon a Lasher's death and will deal roughly 4,500 fire damage to anyone within a 15-yard radius. Care needs to be taken when killing these mobs, as several of them killed at the same time could potentially result in a wipe. The third type of mob that will spawn is called an Ancient Conservator. He will immediately put a non-dispellable debuff called Conservator's Grip. This is a pacifying aura of sorts, as it will prevent players from attacking or casting spells. The only way to be rid of this debuff is to run underneath a mushroom that appears with this mob. Running underneath will cause players to lose the debuff and gain a buff that gives plus 25% damage. The mushrooms will constantly grow larger, but eventually shrink down and disappear rapidly. Raid members will need to move to a different mushroom when this happens. The Conservator will also put a debuff called Nature's Fury on a random raid member that will inflict around 4,500 nature damage to allies nearby every 2 seconds for a total of 10 seconds. Raid members with this debuff need to move away ASAP. Constantly throughout the fight, Freya will spawn something called Aenar's Gift. This is an NPC tree that has roughly 20,000 health and does not have any attacks. The tree will need to be killed within 12 seconds of its spawn, otherwise it will cast Lifebinder's Gift, an ability that heals Freya and her allies for 30% of their maximum health. A helpful tactic here is to have a dedicated DPS class watching out for these. Upon killing the 6 waves of mobs, Freya will enter Phase 2, or the boss phase. Her stack of buffs increasing her healing will be gone, allowing her to have only the base buff of 6,000 health per second. This should be cut in half by a Hunter's Aim Shot, Warrior's Mortal Strike, Rogue's Wound Poison, or other similar ability on other classes, to a minimum of 3,000 health per second. Freya will also cast Sunbeam, an ability that has an unlimited range and inflicts around 5,500 nature damage to all targets within 8 yards of the initial target, including the initial target themselves. Freya will continue to spawn Aenar's Gifts frequently, and will also drop glowing green pods on the ground called Nature Bombs. After 10 seconds, she will detonate these, causing a knockback effect to players, inflicting around 6,000 nature damage. The general strategy here is to kite Freya around the entire room, avoiding the bombs by constantly moving. This phase is essentially a DPS race against her enrage timer. Thanks for watching our videos. If you have any questions, I encourage you to post in the comment section of YouTube below, or feel free to visit our website at www.feelthetremor.com.